call the meeting to order, August 20th, 2026 Planning Board meeting. Frank and Logan, we need you to both sit in for Paul and Mr. Coviello, who may or may not be showing up. He's coming in from Chicago, so had a flight delay earlier. We'll see what happens. We have a presentation on the capital improvement plan process for you.
That would be me. I'm going to step down and do that. Peter, do you mind running the slides?
No.
Good evening, planning board members. I'm taking off my planning board member hat and putting on my city manager hat and presenting on behalf of the finance team and my colleagues the kickoff presentation that was shared with the City Council this past Monday night. We're excited, believe it or not, to start again. It's August, and yet it reminds us all that the budget process is truly a 12-month process. So not a whole lot has changed. So for those of you who are familiar with this presentation and with the process, you won't learn a whole lot of new things, but we'd like to reinforce some of the highlights. So next slide, please. So what is the CIP and why do we have one? It is the opportunity to identify capital needs across the organization, and it's a way to communicate those needs to the residents. It allows staff to prioritize what is important. It allows to plan for funding. And as you've watched the CIP grow and change over the years, we change our priorities year to year. So it's always an opportunity to adjust and to adapt to different conditions and different needs of the organization. And lastly, it's important to maintain city infrastructure across all divisions. And again, these pictures are examples of what we do with CIP money. Next slide. These are items that help determine what qualifies as a CIP project. It has to relate to construction or expansion of a public facility or rehabilitation of a public facility over the amount of $50,000. It allows for design and planning work. It allows for non-vehicular equipment in excess of $50,000, and it allows for replacement and purchase of vehicles with the life expectancy shown there of at least 10 years, and lastly for land acquisition. Next slide. I won't read the whole slide, but this shows you how projects are evaluated and prioritized, at least internally at the staff level, and then we articulate that when we bring it back for public conversation. We look at how it relates to core function, how it provides a financial benefit, and how it augments or supports a community plan or improvement of an existing plan. Next slide. So as a reminder, the fiscal year we're in has seen the capital outlay or the pay-as-you-go portion of the capital budget at 0.96%, and the city's goal or policy for using capital outlay or cash for projects is no more than 2% of the prior year's budget. So this year, we're reaching, you'll see a pattern here. We're trying to keep that number as lean as possible, and it's 0.96%, and we are mindful that every year the budget does grow. So that's why we are trying to be mindful of keeping that budget, at least the cash portion, as efficient and as modest as possible. Next slide. Next up will be the other funding option, which is using debt. And the city's goal for net debt service is to remain below 10% of the prior year budget. And we have kept that for this year at 7.64%. It's worth noting that the bars always show historically in the out years that it approaches that 10% line. And as you have seen being involved in other CIP processes, we always manage that number to within the no more than 8.5%, usually between 7 and 8.5%. And this year is no different, coming in at 7.64%. Next slide. This slide shows the 10-year outlook. We've taken to not only using the 6-year look ahead, but things we used to call beyond the planning horizon, which really are no longer beyond the planning horizon. At any point in time, we need to be ready for those as well. So you'll see that some debt comes off our planning in the years 9 and 10, as you see there. It is important to note that as of now, no new projects have been added, and that's typical of the beginning of the cycle. We have included a mix of bond timelines utilized. We use different length of bonds depending on the project. And it's important to note that this projection includes the initial debt amount for the municipal complex project, which is 42.2. So that has not changed. That remains included in this look ahead. Next slide. Global CIP thoughts. This chart really has not changed, but the important thing to note on this slide is that projects that involve capital funding really come before the public and before the council and the planning board in the case of the CIP 3 times. It first gets introduced in a CIP. It then gets incorporated in the budget when the CIP is included in the adoption of the budget. And then we come back a 3rd time when we're ready to ask for bond authorization, when bonding is included. So it's important to note that these projects are discussed multiple times in public, really to affirm support and to be able to articulate why it's needed. Next slide. We are at the beginning of this slide. We're in August at the work session, and that should also say planning board kickoff as well. Every note with a little human next to it means that it's a chance for public input. We look forward to receiving citizen requests. I know we have a handful already. The deadline for citizen requests and requests of boards, commissions, and committees is September 18th. And then we will hold a public meeting on October 8th to discuss what we've received. Councilor Moreau has always been kind enough to sit in that capacity, and we hope to have the planning board chair as well. And then we have a series of hearings in November that are joint in nature with the council and the planning board. And as we did last year, we look to adopt the CIP much earlier in the budget process so that it becomes more of a conversation as we go. I think that this is our last slide. This is a reminder to all citizens and boards, committees, commissions. We look forward to any information that you'd like to share with us. And oftentimes it's something we might be already working on or something that may or may not be eligible. But we also get plenty of good community-driven ideas. The most recent ones I can think of would be sidewalk requests from neighborhoods. And we look forward to vetting those and sharing where they rank in the priority of other projects. So happy to stop there, happy to answer any questions.
General question that may ramble a little bit in a conversation. What's the relationship between the master plan and the capital budget, in that there are really 2 major outflows from the master plan, one zoning and the other is the CIP, and we're at a point where I don't know what's happening with the master plan really. I haven't seen anything since April, but it looks as if maybe we'll miss this cycle. So can you help me understand the relation between the two and what will flow, what you expect in the master plan and what will flow into the CIP?
Sure, and I will look for comments from the chair and other folks on the dais as well. The master plan is a plan that starts out aspirational and works through an implementation set of items, if you will. So we expect the final version of the master plan by the end of the calendar year. So in terms of timing, what has been discussed and what will be shared in the fall as final findings within the plan would be things we talk about as a community, and then at some point in the future assign a priority or a rank or an importance. Some of the things will be within the city's control, some will not. Some may be incumbent upon private property owners and residents. So what I think the council and the planning board need to do when the master plan is completed is to decide what within that plan then needs to be addressed in the CIP that might not already be. So that's my gut reaction to your question, but I would look to have anyone else color in that thought.
Let's keep in mind the CIP is a planning document, and it's sort of a planning document for spending money. And every single item that goes into the CIP actually connects back to another document, whether it be the bike ped plan, the master plan, or other documents like that. So we pull all of our, items that go into that as part of those many plans that we have out there. The Market Square plan, all of those plans get rolled in, and it's when those items are mentioned, that's the back support, shall we say, for each of those planning documents as to why it's now going into the CIP and getting money allotted to it in either next year or a future date.
So those hoping that the master plan can lead to things in the next calendar cycle really probably are going to be disappointed, I guess.
Let me stop you to say, it could be that the master plan affirms some of the things we're doing from a capital planning perspective too.
Okay. The last version we had 5 development areas of the city that may involve some infrastructure. They may involve road changes. 2 or 3 of them might involve traffic circles. And if we decide to put, vision-wise at least, housing into the southwest quadrant of the city, you may need sewer and water and road developments. And last month we talked about some things, Banfield Road, that might involve capital if we did believe in that direction. So to the extent that we look to the capital plan for a vision as to how those things are going to develop, and if that's not going to be available till the end of the year, and if this sales in the fourth quarter, we've really missed this cycle, haven't we?
Well, what I think you need to appreciate and recognize is things that come on the capital plan this fall may not come in the capital plan for the next fiscal year. They may come out, they may be proposed for an out year, year 2 or year 3 or year 4 of the CIP. There's going to be some foundational enabling work with lots of projects that would need to take place before we can articulate a hard and fast CIP element sheet for a particular construction project, if you will, like the development of a traffic circle to support something that was in the master plan. We also have to be mindful of following with the zoning, and some work would only take place if there were zoning created to allow for the things that would then need the construction work related. So the DPW folks, I'll speak for them, are always planning ahead and trying to understand what the workload is, not for the next 2 or 3 months, but for the next 5 or 6 years. So if there were priorities that came out of the master plan that don't exist now, those would rise in priority as the CIP is built. And I would be surprised to see that things come on that would impact next year's planning for next fiscal year. Because if you held to what was supported in the current CIP for next fiscal year, at one point in time you thought that was the priority. So if the priorities change, we'll need to know that. But we have a roadmap, and as Councilman Moreau said, a plan. Again, it's only a plan until some money is attached to it in every June by a budget. So there are certainly abilities to impact the CIP that gets adopted in December before it gets incorporated into the budget in June. I think I said a lot of things there, but there's so much work that goes into the planning of the elements that make up a CIP.
It's also not fixed, and that's one of the differences.
Right.
The master plan gets adopted on a periodic basis, and it sets pretty large goals. The manager's example of a sidewalk, that's not something you'll ever find in a master plan. Now, you might find a goal to enhance pedestrian mobility in a master plan, but then the CIP would take something like that and actually start to make it happen on the ground. But from my experience with capital improvement plans, and manager certainly knows this better than I do, they do evolve. So what gets talked about this year, what gets adopted may change next year, may change the following year, depending on other things that are happening in the city. And it's the next step before implementation, I think, is one way to look at it, at least the way I look at it.
There are many items in the CIP that essentially involve recurring lines for things like roadway improvements, sidewalk improvements. And in any given year, the DPW folks can prioritize what rises to the top in that given year. So if there were zoning in place and political sentiment to make a change that would dictate how that year's allocation of pavement or sidewalk work were to be done, that's a conversation that could be had.
The big picture that the planning board is supposed to be keeping in mind, because development comes through this board, we're supposed to know where things are happening as they happen around the city, and how the big picture, the really big infrastructure issues like sewer and water and electricity. You know, the city doesn't control electricity, but if we know that there's a part of the city that doesn't have adequate electrical service, that's something to consider as development projects come in. And if we find that, based on reports we get from DPW, that this part of the city does not have adequate water supply for fire protection, that's something to rise to the top and get into a CIP and possibly even impact fees and other things that we've touched on. So they're interrelated, and they should feed each other as things go forward. I should know the answer to this question, but I don't, Karen.
Uh-oh, if you don't, I don't know if I do. Let's go.
No, these are easy for you. The 2% and the 8%, or the 10%.
2 and
actually,
10, yep.
limits. Those are just goals, right? Were they adopted as council goals? Are they manager goals? Or are they just,
They are
Guidelines.
city financial policies
okay?
that I don't know if there was a council that acknowledged a city financial policy. In my lifetime, we have not sought to violate or waive the policy.
That's what I thought. They seem to have they're just a thing that the city's stuck with,
And,
So-
and
It's
It's
been
a-
a city policy for as long as I've been on the planning board.
it's a city policy that we benefit from every time we get a bond rating, because those two policies by name are called out by Moody's or Standard & Poor's, the group that rates us. They are happy to see that we have the policies in place and that we follow them.
follow them.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Yes, Bill?
That seems like a healthy policy.
One that's been a priority for this group, and I just don't understand the specific mechanism. I understand how to put a gross push against something, but I don't understand the mechanism to how to really make the slots fit. Is the garage. That, in the spirit of Monday's discussion with the council, there's obviously lots of energy around parking and the recognition of the need for the garage, and there was money in the CIP this year to do a study on where the garage might be, I think. So how do we click that into place so that it'll move forward in the context of the CIP and the budget?
By recognizing the pace at which we move with the current CIP money, with honoring that it stays in the flow of projects for the next fiscal year, that we report how progress is moving. So it's been included, it's now an item in our work plan, so to speak. So I'm not sure what your question is getting at, because at some point it goes from a plan to having dollars associated with it to being on the desk. It's work product for staff at this point to come back and report and make progress on.
So,
The CIP project that resulted in it being on there.
Yep.
The interaction among the different groups, that's why it got on there last year to
so we
start.
can probably assume that for the CIP that will be finalized in December, that there'll be some implementation component of the garage project?
There'll be an understanding of where the project is at the point in time, and then staff will recommend placement in a particular year of the CIP for different elements. I'll use the municipal complex as a good example. We had 1.8 and then 2.4 million for different phases of design. We just moved forward with the 2.4. It remains that the third phase of the work to be done, the 38 million for construction, still in there, but now the 1.8 and the 2.4 have been approved and authorized, so now we can access the money. So it will. I would imagine the garage project flowing in a manner like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We sort of jumped ahead for that, but minutes from the July 16th meeting, if folks had a chance to look those over.
I move to approve the minutes from the July 16th meeting.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll abstain. I was not here.
We have council referrals, and I think I'm going to ask Peter to help lead with those.
The first one is related to the zoning text amendment to remove the bulk of the parking from the zoning ordinance. This was, the draft that's in the packet was from last month's meeting. Just on review, I know there's a couple, like, with the work staff has done with the site plan regs, I need to make a couple corrections to references, but that can be done in advance of sending it to the council. And I know Councilor Moreau had a comment. I think
10.1124.10. It reads as, loading areas shall not be located between the front property line and any building or structure nor in a required or.
that's right. So I think, and the rest of the sentence says side yard or rear yard.
Which got crossed
Which
out.
got struck, and so I think that just needs to,
I wasn't sure if
unstruck,
everything
yeah.
needed to be, more got needed to be struck, or if we needed to take stuff away. I wasn't quite sure.
Someone got red highlighter happy.
right, there's a lot of striking in this, so.
I'm like, it's not even a sentence anymore. That can get fixed. I'm happy. That was the only problem I found.
So the recommendation is to forward this to council, knowing that the site plan regulation amendments will kind of parallel. We do need to have a public hearing on those changes, but if the zoning amendment was forwarded to council, they still need to have 3 readings, so that would probably take 2 months, 6 weeks or 2 months easily.
Well, our next meeting's not till September 14th, so we wouldn't even be able to have first reading until then.
And the planning board could consider the site plan changes at their meeting on the 17th. But the advice is to vote on the site plan regs, to have them basically be in effect the night that the council votes to amend the zoning ordinance. So you don't have duplicate regulations or a gap in regulations.
Duplicate's better than a gap.
Right.
Yeah, because if we hear it on the 17th, there's another week and a couple of days before the following city council meeting, which would be a public hearing for second reading for this. So, yeah, that would probably work out, and then we could do third reading at the same time. We do have the approval of that to come forward, so.
In other words, Peter, at the point at which the city council adopts and votes, it's effective immediately at that point.
Your vote on the site plan regs would say effective immediately upon adoption of the council voting on the zoning amendment.
In the event of applications that maybe were previously approved and have to come back, there's some cleanup that might have to happen if someone is straddling the 2 sets of language. No?
I think when it's advertised for removal, that's when there's,
You have to conform.
yeah.
Right? Let me just ask a question, because this happens a lot with projects and other boards. A project has been approved. They have to come back for something else. Are they required to meet, and they may have to come back for something else that touches upon parking? They've had a previously approved plan, but they're making a minor alteration. How do we address that?
If they're vested, they're protected.
Okay.
Or if they had design review, they're protected.
Okay.
But also by bringing most of them into site plan, the planning board has more flexibility to grant waivers or exceptions too. So if there's something minor, that's easily dealt with, much more easily than with zoning.
Thank you.
And the council vote will be, it's not on the entirety, it's just about,
It's just about
It's just
Article 11.
removing it.
It's just removing it, yeah.
We remove it from the ordinance. You guys actually put it into site plan.
Right.
you're one of those guys.
I said we.
So, folks understand the parking?
I just have a question.
Yes.
Because we're removing all of this language and it's going to site plan review, will there be new language in the site plan review? Or is it merely
Yes.
the translation?
Initially, it was just copied and pasted.
Yeah.
And at the last meeting in July,
I requested.
staff is instructed to kind of simplify it. So the draft that's before you tonight has been pared down and simplified to an extent.
I think it looks much better.
So it is different.
So on that note, some of the struck text here, section 10.1112.143, says the planning board may grant a conditional use permit only if it finds the number of off-street parking spaces required or allowed by the permit will be adequate and appropriate for the proposed use of the property. It also says, at its discretion, the planning board may require more off-street parking spaces than the minimum requested by the applicant, or may allow for fewer spaces than the maximum number requested by the applicant. Is it assumed that we are then moving with discretion moving forward?
So that, so there will no longer be a conditional use permit for parking in the site plan regs. There'll be
But the
allow availability for the planning board to make modifications
at its discretion.
at its discretion.
There's a whole section on flexibility.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Did you read the new ones?
Yeah, I'm just making sure that my understanding was correct in that we will operate, that we will operate using our discretion. So when we are reviewing proposals, I know how to think about it. It's that we are in fact just using our discretion with relative sense to whatever the use is.
To a point, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And if somebody does a new study, as they happen all the time, in the world of parking, everybody's an expert, but there are real experts out there. You don't have to change the zoning ordinance to incorporate it. We could just say, that's a good source. We like that study. Let's look at that data, and it works here. So, small thing, but
Yeah.
it helps. Housing action plan?
So
Oh, wait, don't we have to make a vote?
you wanna-
Are we actually referring tonight, or are we?
I'm ready to, with the corrections as amended. I'll make a motion, we vote to recommend the city council to hold first reading on the proposed zoning ordinance amendment as amended.
Second?
Discussion.
I'm ready to move forward. I think this will be appreciated. We've been talking about doing this, at least I've been talking about it for many years. I don't remember how many, but years. So I think it'll be exciting to move it forward to first reading. If the council discussion comes around wanting to know what's going to be in our site plan regulations, we can provide that to them as an informational item so that they can see what's in there. But yeah, I think the timing, Peter's right, we need to sort of move on it because it does take us so long in order to get these put in, although we are in the process of at least changing notice to make it so we don't have to wait quite so long sometimes for the public hearing notice. So I'm ready to move it forward. I think we're ready to go.
And you're right, Beth. Thank you for reminding me.
Agreed.
Yes, Bill?
And we will be able to have the site plan regulations in place the moment that the prior is removed.
Yes.
We won't have a gap.
Right, because we, on the 17th of September, will have a public hearing, at which point we can then act on them. And once we act on them, they're there subject to the city council's final vote to remove it from the ordinance. So it'll be ready to go, right in place.
Good.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right, the housing action plan was developed by staff and the housing committee, and it was then forwarded to city council. City council has referred it to the planning board for comment. They've also scheduled 2 public meetings, one on September 23rd and one on September 28th. When I wrote the recommendation, I was thinking that the planning board might want to wait until after the public meetings to see what additional input is provided by the public. I don't know if the council is intending to adopt it on the 28th. If that was the intent, then maybe the planning board could go ahead and forward any comments they have tonight, with an expectation that if there are, drastic changes, that you might want to see it again.
We meet before the 28th, though, right?
We meet
We
on
meet
the
17th.
17th, so not before, we meet before both of the meetings.
Could you be prepared to present any changes that may have been made to that document to us at that meeting?
Well, the
It won't-
public meetings are after our meeting,
Okay,
so it would have to be in October.
right, okay.
Yeah.
You know, does council intend to?
I don't know if our intention is to take action that night, but I can tell you that from the housing committee perspective, it was our idea that we would like planning board feedback, public feedback, and all that feedback to come back to council before they make that final decision.
So from that perspective, ideally, you'd like to see planning board.
Give some sort of feedback, hopefully, before the 28th, yeah. And then it'll depend on how much feedback we have and how many changes need to be happen as to whether or not we make a decision, or if we have to postpone it till October.
I was thinking we weren't making formal recommendation tonight, so I'd like the 17th.
Yeah. I figured
we certainly-
it takes a long time to absorb all this information. I mean, Andrew and I have been looking at it for how long now?
Yeah,
Months?
a handful of months, certainly. This is something that I'm certainly very engaged with and passionate about. I feel as though we really took great time and care to find the priorities. And they are not finite either. So there is some greater interpretation or greater applicability to a lot of these as well. So, I'd be happy to chat with anybody on this board at least to talk about where some of these could go to, rather than just, these 2 or 3 line statements as the action item. But I think there's a lot more to each one of them that we've discussed on the Housing Action Plan Committee that are definitely great triggers to bigger change.
Bill?
Yeah, I am as supportive as anybody in terms of having this scope and rational organization and listing of items and timelines and action steps and whatever. I truly am. I think there are a couple items missing, which I'd like to know what mechanism to be able to get those into the thinking. But beyond that, there's no I don't know what it means to approve this document. For example, it says change single-family districts to allow multifamily housing. If we approve this document, are we recommending that the city council do away with single-family zoning? And there's that kind of a, what I'll call in some cases, feel-good component of the proposals. And so I'd like more rigor around understanding the economics and the real, do we really mean it, component of these items. And there's also kind of as another overlay, there's maybe 25 or 30 state laws that have changed in the last 6 months relative to housing. Some of them in this area of 79E, and some of them in the rehab, the redoing of what we call gateway districts. And I'm not sure that this document digests all of the current state of the state law. So somewhere along the way, before the city council says, yes, we mean it and this is what we're going to do, there needs to be some parsing of pieces of this to say what's the economic benefit, what's the impact on the housing that people currently live in, and kind of one more level of reality, I would call it, to the document before people would want to act on it, if acting on it means that something's really going to happen.
Back to your first point, if something's missing, if you could bring that to our attention, that's how we talk about something like that. So if
Okay.
you could make that,
Yeah,
circulate
well,
that.
one
Whether
thing-
you have it tonight or by the 17th, our next meeting, just be prepared to bring it up so we can talk about it. And these other points, state
Yeah.
law,
Well, to your point, your first point, if it is missing, call me or email me. I'm happy to talk through it, and maybe it's intentionally missing and we omitted it because it was either a duplicate or it just didn't achieve a certain goal. Secondarily, the third column on this, key implementation steps, speaks to where, how, and who is involved in making some of those changes. And then the last column is really a time frame at which we expect that to be able to be achieved. So your point about converting single-family home into more units, obviously that doesn't get done overnight. And so it would probably come back to the housing committee, and we would review those types of details to make sure we're covering the bases, and then pushing it forward into the hands of city council, the planning board, so on and so forth. So ultimately, the priorities being numbered 1 through 7, and then the ancillary ones down below, it just shows the city council, the city, and I guess the planning board, where we are encouraged or putting most of our effort into. And we spent a long time identifying those priorities, and numbering them was just one way for us to say, this is really what we want to start with. And maybe, again, there's some additional or residual benefit from those 1 through 7 priorities that helps some of the other ones below it. Does that answer your question?
Kind of.
What can I elaborate on?
I don't know if, maybe I underestimate the amount of work that people intend to do in the key implementation steps column. That may be the thing where the chaff gets taken away from the wheat.
Well, yeah, most of which is required by law. So we can't just skip those steps by saying, okay, we want to conduct a comprehensive zoning review to identify barriers to housing development, prioritize necessary regulatory reforms. Like, that takes several months to do. So all of that comes with a procedure, much like we just did with this, site plan regulations. That would be the same process, in my opinion. And so the housing committee would be held accountable, the city council would be held accountable, the planning board the same, and by that nature, we would see progress with those priorities. And that's, again, why we numbered them, is so that we know, hey, where are we on step number 1 or priority number 5, and how are we making progress with these?
Would it be fair to say that this would be a list of policy goals and prioritizations?
Yeah.
So that we can, get, because
Yeah,
there's almost an endless number of things that come before staff and this board to think about.
Right.
And this helps provide some direction for where the focus should be, and probably items 1 through 7,
So
if
I
they
think,
survive, would be.
Bill, to answer your question a little, maybe more literal, like priority number 7, rezone office research and general business districts to allow mixed use and residential development. That's a pretty finite process, in my opinion, where we know the steps to achieve that. So if we want to say, how do we get there? We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we're done, and it's achieved.
Right.
Versus priority number 4, expand zoning provisions to allow and encourage cottage housing and clustered small lot residential development. That's a little bit more holistic. We would need to cultivate some research and visioning as to what that will look like and where that will be. So maybe that's, to your point, more ambiguous or obscure in this moment, but there is a path to that as well, because the housing committee will be working on that simultaneous to some of these other goals. I promise.
Just to add to that, I mean, our priorities came up because each and every member of the housing committee had to list their top 3 priorities, and it was who got the most votes, and 79E rose to the top of almost everyone in the room thought that was a really major priority. So when each of us are doing that, that says we did a true ranking in order to come up with this top 7 list. We didn't just do it by, consensus. Like, we each gave our priorities and we gave them almost, a tally of what we all considered. And the ones at the top are the ones that are, in our mind, the highest priority and will be the biggest bang. And we did give, ideas about the 3 areas that we wanted to work on 79E, so we could actually, because I don't know if you remember, but it was probably a year ago when City Council actually asked staff to look at implementing 79E, and they came back to us and said, there's too much volume to it. You need to give us a more narrow focus. And then we had a work session, and then we sent it as part of this housing action plan. And now we're really getting to a point where the housing committee has talked about it enough that we actually do have a focus around where we want to concentrate. So now that can start to become part of implementation, which is why it's one of our highest priorities in the shortest period of time.
Joe?
Great document. Clearly, a lot of work went into it, and I applaud those who were involved with it. I think that I wish there was a tool. I don't know if AI can do this for us. I wish there was a tool to pick any one of these priorities that would show us physically what could potentially happen if you were to implement one of these to its fullest extent in any given use or neighborhood. I think Bill might be getting at, like, what could this do, and what would the unintended consequences be?
Yeah, without actually drawing it out or rendering it out, we have definitely discussed that for the
Great.
last 9 months
Great.
on this committee.
Great.
For example, if you go down to reviewing dimensional zoning standards or allowing conversion of existing single-family homes into multi-dwelling units, like, that's one of mine that I was fairly strongly behind, because we can go down the street, you know, proverbially or literally walk down the street and say, there's a very large house, you could see 3 or 4 units in it, because Islington Street is very similar to that. And then we draw similarities from some existing neighborhoods elsewhere. And so that's sort of how we conducted those conversations. And Housing Committee, as your dad, is a little bit of a different environment where we're literally in a round table and just firing ideas. And so that has certainly helped push some of these ideas further along in the maturity scale than others. But some of these are also much quicker and lower hanging fruit, like amending zoning regulations to allow conversion of commercial and office building into residential units. We know how to do that. We've done it before. And so those are definitely intentional. We know what the results are or what they could be, because we have literal output from that in our zoning ordinance.
Great, thank you. Good work.
Educational component is important. To just quickly on your point of AI, it's being used in Massachusetts right now to oppose ADUs. I won't show you the graphic, but
But it is helpful. Like, that's what I do all day
there are ways
long,
to do
so
it. There-
Right.
yeah,
Spend
we'll
a
have
little
it.
bit of time. in
Frank, did you have your hand up?
I did. I just have a quick question just for clarification on the time frame column, just to make sure I understand it correctly. Is the time frame given from the adoption or endorsement of this document, or from
It would-
when it's like work starts on that?
Right, when work starts
Priority.
on that task.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
We're not, yeah,
for
we're
both
not out of the
myself
gate
and
starting
anyone
the
else
clock
who
on
might
all
be
these.
confused about that for the public.
I would say that, you know, we're looking, after the master plan, we're looking to do a comprehensive zoning review. And many consultants can do like a build-out analysis or
Right.
show what would happen if we change the densities in certain districts. So I'm sure that will be part of that review.
Excellent.
And
And
then,
it has to be for the public to understand it, and for us to understand it.
Right.
Yeah, I think it'd be important for this board especially to be able to spend this next month really digging in and thinking about these. And is there anything that we've missed? So,
So can we dedicate, so we plan to do that for our September meeting. Let's really have a conversation about this.
Has the housing committee or the planning staff figured out a way to present this for the general public? Because I look at this as someone who studied planning, I'm like, oh, this sounds really interesting, but then I think about it as someone who, you know, is working with a lot of families who are, you know, trying to do 50 million things and maybe aren't up to date on planning lingo or rezoning, and they hear things like workforce housing and suddenly their mind is going to the worst place that they see on TV shows. So is there a way, or someone who is presenting this in a way that makes it user friendly? Because I know, like, when some of the other projects have come up that are centered around workforce housing, you see some of the worst kind of public comments come out, and not out of, you know, anything other than a lack of knowledge or a lack of understanding, or a not realizing that, you know, the teacher who takes care of their children lives in workforce housing. So are you guys looking at a way to present many of these topics in a way that is a shiny, happy, smiley face.
The shiny, happy, smiley face is gonna happen at this board. The housing committee's come up with a policy and the recommendations, and I think working with staff, the planning board, that's our job in interacting with the public and making it, here's the goal. The housing committee's saying, here's the goal, make it happen. So now we have to look at, and that's a very good point, because people have to understand it.
Yeah.
I do think that's, we'll end up having some visual correlations with these. So images of what cottage housing looks like, or images of what happens when you shift office research and business into mixed-use neighborhoods. So we'll tie
I
in-
think some of the physical images is great, but also think about the social. So the people and
Okay.
how they're gonna see the people and how they're gonna see those people moving into their neighborhoods around their children. And, cause the building can look great, but if they're thinking about the people in the building. So I think, yes, seeing the images of the buildings is great, but understanding how you can also present the residents.
the human level.
Yes.
Got it.
Because a lot of if you really truly listen to the comments, they might say something about the way the building looks, but there's always something about the people.
Who it is. Valid point.
I've heard it many times. If there are no other comments.
Okay, so we have a plan for
I-
the housing action plan.
Yeah, you want a motion?
Well, I think the plan is to work on it at the next meeting, but
Yeah, vote to continue review of the housing action plan until September 17th meeting.
that sounds like a good motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Heritage Commission, this is an interesting one. I think this one has changed a little bit
It
since
has
the memo.
changed.
Did it go away?
So, City Council in July, they voted to recommend the planning board review the potential establishment of a Heritage Commission. And report back, they did put a deadline of September 28th, so we have tonight and the 17th to discuss this. So I did some research, and the chair has done some research. We looked at what we do now for demolition and historic preservation. We have the Historic District Commission that has distinct boundaries of their historic district. And then we have a demolition review ordinance that if you're proposing to demolish a structure and you're not going to a land use board, you have to post the property and then notice in the paper. If someone objects to it, then that would trigger the convening of the demolition review committee. But really, it's just a delay process. They could delay it for up to 90 days. And then the person could still demolish the building. If you have a application before a land use board, you're exempt from the demolition ordinance because the advertising of that application serves as the notice, so you don't have to comply with the demolition ordinance. I noted in here, since I've been here, that committee has only met 3 times, and really that was in, I think, 2 in 2018 and 1 in 2019. Councilor Monroe sits on that committee.
I used to.
Or used to.
I chaired it.
But a Heritage Commission really would be advisory, similar to that of the Conservation Commission. If it was established, they could advise land use boards on applications, or they could seek funding, they could conduct surveys, and education to the public.
And grants.
Yeah, right, and do grants. So since the memo, we've had further discussions about creating a commission through the Innovative Land Use Control Statute. The chair has done some research on that, and we've spoken to legal about it, and it seems like a potential path forward. They'd still be advisory, but we could create it so that they advise us on demolition, massing. I think we could lay out. It depends on what we want to have them do, but that would be one option. Do you want to talk about that further or not?
As I understand the question from council dealt with, could there be a way to actually prevent demolition of some buildings that are outside existing historic districts? And the answer until recently has been no, there really isn't a way to do that. I talked to the municipal association, we've talked to city legal, talked to staff. There is a way under the innovative land use controls to probably do it. Nobody's done it yet, but the municipal association and the legal department here in the city think it can work if we want to do it. And by we, I mean the city, not just the planning board, and obviously the council. It could be a much more limited historic district, if you will, which could deal with just demolition of certain structures, which would have to meet, and this is the part where it gets tricky, and Trevor and I had a conversation about this the other day, because in order to prevent the demolition of a building, you'd have to establish some criteria that would be pretty good. It can't just be arbitrary. But there are buildings in the city that are not currently in the historic district that probably would conform. Now, the other thing that maybe would more often, and almost certainly would more often conform, would be a massing control. So that if a building was coming down, it wouldn't be you wouldn't be allowed to be replaced with a gigantic fill the building envelope structure if that neighborhood was not, if the context didn't fit for that neighborhood. In order for that to work under the innovative land use control, it would come to this board, not the HDC. So the Heritage Commission, if a Heritage Commission were established, the Heritage Commission could do a lot of the legwork to make a recommendation to this board, or this board could do it by itself. The Heritage Commission component would be sort of optional, and depending on where that needs people, it needs staff to run it, to help run it rather. Planning board, obviously, we're already here, so that's a factor in considering how to do it. Heritage Commission by itself, it can only be advisory. That's pretty clear. So it's not much different than what we have now in terms of requiring review of demolition, but it could be extended. They can make a recommendation for, say, a massing limitation, but in order to make that a requirement, it would have to become a regulatory matter adopted by the council and put to the planning board. I don't know if I put everybody to sleep and confused everybody, but go ahead, Andrew.
What are the time constraints on the demolition permits now?
If you go before demolition review committee, we cannot delay it more than 90 days.
And that would be after an initial 30-day, because you first advertise it, post it for 30 days.
Yeah.
And if there's no objection or anything, then you can demolish it.
Yeah. So, 3 times in the last 9 years just doesn't strike me as something that's statistical significance, where I would be like, yeah, we should have more regulation on that, because we talk a lot about housing affordability, and one of the components of affordability is time. And if we're talking about demoing a building and starting, and the difference is a 3-month span, I feel as though that's not helpful. Number 2 of my points is under section 14.205, section 2C, page 4. At the conclusion of the hearing, the committee shall determine if the building is significant or not significant based on whether the building is of such historic, architectural, or cultural value that its removal would be detrimental to the public interest. That's extremely subjective in my opinion, and has no literal definition applied to it, at least in that statement, where I'd feel confident enough putting somebody out there and letting a board review that.
That's the demolition review committee ordinance you're looking at.
Yeah, that would not pass muster with what I
Yep.
was talking about.
So
It's too subjective.
why do I not
And the
have-
reason it can be subjective is it's advisory. It's not mandatory. Once you cross that threshold of making it mandatory, you cannot do it. Now you have to have much more specific criteria. To your point about affordability, there is an argument that some larger buildings that could be demoed and turned into a large single-family home, a very costly, large single-family home could otherwise be converted into apartments. That is an argument.
Sure.
And it depends, obviously, on the building, the site, and all those details.
I guess just maybe not affordability, but just overall cost. Like, if it's not labeled affordability and it's just cost applied to the applicant.
It's not, this isn't just affordability, and my goal was to find out if it's possible, and I found out it's possible. Now, is it advisable, and how can it work? Those are different questions, and I think that's what we're talking about. And Joe has an opinion about this.
Oh, I just want to offer that when I was on the Historic District Commission for all those years, for nearly a decade, we've had this conversation multiple times about expanding historic districts, and even a Heritage Commission. Back then, and even now, the concern, my immediate concern is just workload on staff and boards. It gets very intense. It also will add a significant amount of workload potentially to the legal department, because if we're really getting into the topic of property rights. Obviously, we start implementing this, neighborhoods, well, they don't like it. They don't like the idea of regulation being overlaid into their neighborhoods, so we need to be prepared for that. Obviously, as someone who, I have a great love and respect for historic architecture in the city, I really do, but I also understand the challenges of broadening this regulation in other parts of the city. The reason this is coming up for discussion, I wish that the reason were more noble than the fear of just of demolition and slowing demolition down, rather than if we have very real and significant cultural assets in the city that are inspiring people for this change, rather than, let's just simply stop demolition. I wish it were more than.
It is more than just demolition. It is more of a cultural issue, and it's part, there are neighborhoods in the city that aren't in the historic district, perhaps shouldn't be in the historic district, but maybe will in some, number of years as the city ages. But there are neighborhoods that people, and this is a question we won't know until the public is engaged. Would the neighborhoods like this? Because you were talking about the change. I've seen changes in cities where demolition happens, and to use the expression, McMansions get built, and people hate it.
Right.
And that's the sort. Is that the sort of thing that people are interested in here? I don't know. That's the question.
So when it was brought forward to council, I had a lot of the same concerns that Mr. Almeida brought up. And I guess the part that I would say I got sold on it, but it made me think, okay, it's at least worth us all having a conversation over, which is why I suggested it come to this board, is the fact that it is an education piece. It's ability for a group to go around and look at buildings like the Cary Cottage that sit well outside, and we're not protected, right? And that was the only savior that we have from Demolition Review Committee, so I'll keep bringing it up over and over again.
Success story.
It was a success story, right? And I don't think this is entirely about demolition, but it's about taking a look at what are our historic resources, documenting those resources as part of the city, and educating the owners of those buildings or whoever happens to be in charge of those buildings as to their historic significance. So that outreach, the education, and just having a really good idea about what we have and what truly has historic, implications or doesn't. I found that piece helpful. I agree. I think it's probably going to be a lot of work. You're talking about probably a member of the HGC, a member of a planning board. You're talking about staff time. So I think there's positives and negatives all wrapped up. So I'm not quite sure what the right answer is, but I think it's worth at least the city having a conversation about it.
I do want to echo Andrew's comments as well. I agree with what he said.
Which part?
I remember as you were saying them, I was going to say I agree with it. I exactly agree. Now I can't remember what you said. I remember so because I've spoken since. So, remind us what you said, Andrew. Sorry, it's worth repeating.
The time or the.
Oh, it had a lot to do with the 90-day delay. I've heard people say that it is. I've heard residents say that it's really viewed as harassment almost. It's just, it's a way to put a spoke in the wheels of someone's project. Some people view it that way. The other, I think I'm remembering what your other comment was now. Oh, the subjectivity of this group. The neighborhoods that you brought up as examples, I know the neighborhoods you're referring to where they're not in the historic district. They're beautiful neighborhoods. New houses are being constructed that some people in the neighborhood don't like. It's very much, architecture is very much like, it's fashion. Some people love those, some people love the contemporary architecture, some people hate it. So it's so subjective, and I'm saying this, as someone.
But scale is less subjective.
Scale is less.
Scale, I think, is more important than
The other
style.
thing we wrestle with scale is that modern building codes, if you have a 3-story building, in a historic building, your floor-to-floor heights are 7.5 feet. In new building, by code, they have to be, 3 feet taller. So, yeah, modern building codes have a massive effect on new construction, truly. But all valid points. Even the scale, yes, sometimes they're too big. I agree.
To Beth's point, I think it's worth having the conversation that, like we're trying to do now, but we need more information. I think, since Peter's memo, we've got new information.
Yeah,
Before next month, we'll have more information, to have a more informed conversation.
right.
And we're not going to adopt anything. We're not going to make a recommendation to council, I don't think.
It does say referrals on here is all, so how, it says, item number 3 is city council referrals, and Heritage Commission is beneath it, so, what are we doing tonight?
So we have they gave us a deadline until September 28th.
September 20,
So we
okay,
have the September meeting to continue discussing this.
great.
So everyone can think about it,
And-
do your own research, and come back with
Yeah.
thoughts.
And we'll try to get some additional information out for folks to look at and think about. Now, keep in mind, what I said is possible, nobody else in New Hampshire's done yet.
Yeah.
It's new. It's a new idea. It seems to be a good one from the attorneys I've spoken with, including ours, which are the most important ones. So we can't say, here's an example. Most communities do adopt the delay ordinance, which is, spoke in the wheels thing. So probably a similar motion on this one.
Could we have a comment down here?
Oh, I'm sorry.
So the focus of this is delaying the demolition. It's not about influencing the new. There's no architectural thought about what's put in its place. Or
There could
I think
be,
there could be.
there could be,
there would
but that may be a bridge too far. The question would be, and this is going to require, depending on how far this goes. Innovative land use control gives the council the authority to give the planning board incredible latitude in what it can do regulatory-wise. So that's why nobody else has done it yet. And nobody else has thought of it, frankly.
Yeah.
So.
one person's opinion, I think the risk to the visage of the city is more in what's done that's new than taking away what's there that's old. I think there's more risk by having no architectural standards. I think there's more risk of damage to the positioning of the city.
Well, I think the historic district has its own, it exists for very good reasons, and I'm a strong supporter of it. That's different than what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And the Heritage Commission component of what we're talking about right now is an option. What we're talking about could be Heritage Commission, it could be Heritage Commission and Planning Board, or it could just be Planning Board. So it could be just Planning Board without additional staff. So we need more information for next month.
This particular one, it's almost necessary to hear from these neighborhoods that we would be
Oh, yeah.
affecting. I'd want to hear from the property owners for sure.
Yep.
There's only so many we would hear from, but
And our recommendation could be that the city council should have an open public forum for this with the public to
Yeah.
discuss it. That could be our recommendation, that
Right.
our concerns are what the public really,
yeah,
if they're on board or not on board, and maybe that's the direction we recommend.
yeah, that would be necessary, absolutely.
Fully
My
agree.
opinion, sorry.
That's right.
Do you think having another possible advisory commission group would sway developers? If it's one more thing they felt they had to go through to get a project built
Sway them in what way? How do you-
into not doing it? Because there are times when, you know, we've heard developers say, oh, I had to go to TAC and then I had to go to the Historic Commission and now I'm seeing you guys and you guys are saying there's a problem with this and now I have to. So having one more possible, even if they don't actually have to go to it, the thought of more regulations and more boards that they feel might have some arbitrary.
Okay, that's a good question. I think you have to look at everything that we're doing in terms of streamlining some things and considering new ideas. This is a new idea. And it goes to the character and context of neighborhoods. So to Beth's point, to Joe's point, do the neighbors want this? We don't know. I don't know. And I can assure you, they don't know because it hasn't been proposed anywhere yet. So, you know, we need to hear from them to see, you know, they may think we don't need it. And council say, great, we don't need it, let's not mess with it. Or there may be accolades, we hate what happened in wherever, and we don't want that to happen to us. And there's a lot of that out there, trust me. So, but I don't know if it's in Portsmouth. So, now can we have a motion to continue this conversation to next
So
month?
moved.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Wrong screen. We have a post-approval waiver request for 409 and 411 Lafayette Road. Is there anybody presenting this, or is this?
No, just, there's a written request. This is a two-lot subdivision, just north of the high school. Minor work. They have some utility work that'll be covered and paid for through an excavation permit. So they are requesting to waive the requirement to have post a bond and do a subdivision review agreement. Public Works is okay with it. And since this can't be done administratively, the planning board has to approve the waiver. It has to come back to you.
Yeah, because they already have the right-of-way right there, which is where all the.
Yep.
things
It's
are
just
gonna go,
minor
yeah.
work and,
Yeah. Unless anyone has any more, I'll vote to grant the requested waiver from section 1X.1 of the subdivision ordinance due to, because strict conformity would pose an unnecessary hardship to the applicant, and waiver would not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation.
We need a second.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So the regulatory amendments, we started talking about these last month, getting there.
right, so the site plan amendments. Last month, they were, as I said earlier, excuse me, they were just copied over from Article 11 with the guidance from the planning board. They've been simplified. We removed the guest parking requirement. The table of uses we condensed, instead of listing all the uses in the zoning ordinance table, condensed them into further, grouped them into categories. The big change really is for the parking, section 4.3, the parking flexibility section, which allows the planning director to modify parking. And I kind of have maybe an amendment from our discussion the other day, Chair, about when site plan is required, which is if you create more than 5 parking spaces. I think adding that to that flexibility section for the planning director would be appropriate, so that the planning director could modify a parking, or like a change of use if they require 5 or fewer parking spaces, the planning director could approve that administratively if they show a good measure on why they don't need that additional parking. But if it's 5 or more, then that would have to come back to the planning board for modification.
That's a nice addition.
So that would be in section 4.3.1 for administrative parking modifications. Number 1, the planning director may approve a parking modification, and then you would just say up to 5 or no more than 5.
Less than 5 spaces.
Yeah, I can have that wording fixed for the next meeting.
And
So
the
basically just adding it to the
applicability,
A through E, right?
we did have a couple of changes right at the beginning also.
Right. The changes at the beginning related to when it's site, that was to be more in conformance with the state code of when site plan is required. Down the road, the objective is to delete B, which is what our current regulations say. What we've been talking about, amending the subdivision ordinance to capture condominium conversion as a subdivision. So we'll start working on that as well to come back to you. But in the meantime, we're going to leave B in here. A lot of the dimensional requirements for parking aisles, that all was just ported over because it's dimensional, and it didn't change any of that for stall sizes or aisle widths. And left the downtown overlay requirements in there. We did add inns. In the current regulations, for some reason, inns were not included in the downtown overlay. So it just was where it was hotels and motels. We added inns to that requirement in section 4.8.
Sorry to interrupt you, just
Yeah.
a quick question of curiosity. So that hasn't been in there previously.
Right.
However, there have been inns developed downtown.
Downtown.
How, in the over, how did you?
So
how
we
do
say they don't require any parking
So
because they're not
it
listed.
wasn't just simply an oversight, they really did not require parking.
Right, because it
Because it
wasn't
was an
listed.
oversight.
Yeah, right.
Gotcha.
Oh, shoot, I'll get rid of mine.
I remember that conversation.
But the process would be that instead of a conditional use permit, they could present request a modification from the board.
Site plan review regulations.
Right.
Got it.
I think this reads much simpler and
Yeah.
much easier.
I did have one other question, it's a technicality. The guest parking requirement was removed because it's no longer allowed, right? Is that by the state? Is that right? Okay.
I like the addition of the bicycle parking.
We still don't address scooters parking?
No.
Good.
Okay.
Personal mobility devices?
I think we're ready for, we have to have a public hearing.
We have to
right?
have a public hearing on this, so
So I think
I'll-
we're ready for
I'm
public
going
hearing.
to change that one section. And then you'll have another chance to discuss it, but it would be advertised for a
Want me to
public
make a
hearing in
motion?
September.
No, it's wrong, I agree.
So if the council stays with its schedule, we'd be adopting, we'd be adopting this in September?
You would be adopting this, but the motion would be that they would be in effect
Upon the
upon
council.
the adoption of the zoning amendments. So that might not be until October,
Depending on how it goes.
depending on how it goes.
Peter? Is the bicycle Section new,
It's not new, but it was changed. We currently have bicycle parking requirements in our ordinance.
right? But is this more extensive?
It's not more extensive, it's just,
Clearer.
it's just clearer, kind of simplified.
It just reads so much
Yeah,
easier.
it reads better. For example, the number 4 in the list of what's exempt, I think it's shown in a table in the zoning ordinance, and now it's just listed.
I think you did a nice job cleaning it up.
Yeah, it's just,
I give you,
reads less like a zoning
Pat on the
ordinance.
back.
Kudos.
Reads less like a zoning ordinance.
right, it reads more like everyone can read it, which is what we kind of wanted it to
Right,
be.
right.
It's good work.
Yeah, thanks.
If there's no more discussion, I'll make a motion that we vote to schedule a public hearing on the proposed amendments to the site plan review regulations as amended at the September 17th, 2026 planning board meeting.
Second.
Discussion on that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
The next one is related to the subdivision ordinance, and this is just one change to be consistent with the zoning amendments that were referred to council last month about noticing for the zoning board, within 300 feet. We're just making that consistent with state statute for a butter notification. In our subdivision ordinance, the definition of a butter is any person who owns land within 200 feet of the boundaries of the land under consideration. And the proposed change would be that it would be a person or entity meeting the definition of a butter contained in RSA 672(3) as amended. So it would be consistent with the state RSA. And so we would notify accordingly for subdivision applications.
And I'll stop getting questions from people why they get a notice when they're not in a butter.
I'll make a motion, we vote to schedule a public hearing on the proposed amendments to the subdivision ordinance at the September 17th, 2026 planning board meeting.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Article 10, there's not been any
Nope.
changes.
Historic boundaries.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Skipped a really big one.
Yeah,
Yeah, I jumped over.
please skip it.
Whoops, sorry
Skipped
about
the
that.
hornet's nest that is beforehand.
So you all had a joint meeting with the HDC earlier in June and discussed advancing just the changes on Middle Street for the boundary of the historic district. The HDC met again in July and didn't have any changes to their original recommendation to the planning board. I did note in the memo, and we did receive a letter back in January or February from a property owner at 670 Middle Street. This property is proposed to be included in its entirety. It's a condo, and the current delineation of the condo is the existing historic boundary. Their house fronts and has access on Chevrolet Avenue.
And it actually can't even really be seen from Middle Street.
Right, it's hard to be seen. So they were requesting to be removed or not included in the historic district. There's another similar property, but that's further down Middle Street. It's 873 Middle. That has a house that fronts on Middle Street, and then there's a house in the back. That house does access Middle Street. It doesn't have a separate entrance on a different road, but it does. And the current boundary splits that parcel in half.
You're talking about the one on the right-hand side? This one?
Yes. that
That's
big
what I
yellow.
thought.
Yeah, I should pull it up.
I mean, we were trying not, the whole point of doing this was to not have lines going through lots, but when you're talking, especially on 670, I'm actually somewhat familiar with the property because I looked at it for a client once. The front building that's right up by the road is a 3-unit, basically apartment building that's considered one condo unit. And it's really the carriage house that's down in the back that actually has a driveway that goes to Chevrolet Ave that is on the backside. So it's like two completely separate buildings, but they are on one condominiumized lot. So
Right.
I'm torn.
And that lot does not have frontage on Middle Street.
No.
Only through the front condominium, right?
Right.
Yeah,
But it doesn't
that building does not have any frontage on it, no.
So to remind everybody, best practices with historic districts is to not sever properties with the historic district boundary. I think on this one, it's unusual since it's a condominium. And as explained with the owner's letter, where they've got their limited commons set up, it's the front unit on Middle Street.
Right.
Pretty much its limited common is the historic district. Now, I'm taking the owner's word on that because I didn't see that on the plan.
For the record, I can tell you that is indeed the case because I saw the condominium docs when they were first drawn.
Perfect.
So that is truly a separate lot in the front.
It's not a
Well,
separate lot.
It's condoized
But
separately.
Okay,
functionally,
how-
it's going to be very similar to
How
it.
do you address development on Chevrolet Ave side? Do they have to come before the HCC? Technically, they do because it's on the lot.
But it doesn't bisect the building.
Doesn't.
If the boundary went through the structure, then they would,
Okay.
but since it doesn't,
If the boundary
Right.
stays where it is, I think the back lot wouldn't have to come
No,
before the
no.
HDC, right?
Right.
they would not.
So I think there's a rationale on that one, I think.
I've been on this site, I know this person. They act as completely separate lots. There's almost no exchange or no relationship between them at this point with the trees that have matured, and there's no driveway that passes through. So I know that they are operated as entirely separate lots otherwise.
Yeah, I think it fits the rationale for why you wouldn't need to include it.
So can you just summarize, just repeat what that what we're looking to do here, just so everyone's clear?
The general rule, when you start to look at a zoning change, is there's certain guidelines, like you generally want to have the same zone on either side of the street, so buildings fronting on the street are the same. On a historic district in particular, it has its own things, and one is that you do not want the line generally to go through a property. You want the entirety of the property. That's considered best practice. So here, it's a very unusually shaped property. It has frontage on 2 roads, which is unusual. It's a condominium that has been divided in terms of its usage by limited common areas, which is also unusual. And therefore, it really is acting as if it is 2 lots.
Okay. Yep.
Even though legally it's not, a condominium is 1 parcel. But it fits, I think it fits very well with the discretion of this board to make a recommendation how you want. And I think keeping it the way it is does make sense.
Very
I
good.
have to agree, but I'm not sure I would agree on the other lot. Because the other
I didn't
lots,
say anything about the other one.
oh, I- I was jumping ahead.
So with this one though,
Yeah. Just no change.
well, if you look on this map, where we're including the parcel to the north, currently it has a little sliver that's out of it.
Actually, that's changed too. It actually goes all the way down to Friend Street now.
Right, so that one,
Because we
that one
just
has,
changed that.
right, that one, right.
This
So,
board actually, remember we had readjusted the 2 back lots? So
Right,
it actually
right.
comes down to about there now.
so that, we'll have to make that change to include that entire property.
Yeah, I think that's
And then it'll
appropriate.
come
That's
back
only
up.
the one building.
Right, it'll come back up and then connect.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. This was before that lot
Before
line.
that, exactly. I was like, we recently changed that lot line, so I know that that's gonna have to change just a little bit on that.
I don't see that affecting 670.
It doesn't.
No, it won't.
It was just a point of, let's get it right if we're gonna change it.
Right, so the other one,
I mean, they
It's
use
more-
Middle Street
they
as
use
an
Middle
address
Street.
street, as an address and access, so I feel like they have to be included. That's a little bit different setup than what we have in the other one.
So should we adopt the recommendations of the HDC with the exception of the one change on 670?
Yes,
Yes.
I agree.
Somebody
So-
want to
I
formalize
make a
it?
motion to vote to recommend to City Council to schedule first reading on the proposed historic district map amendments as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Now Article 10 amendments.
He just wanted to
So-
jump ahead to the end, didn't he?
This is the conditional use permits for wetlands impacts that we talk about at every single meeting practically. And I mentioned it last month. These changes have been in the works for some time. We need to have a meeting with the Conservation Commission to talk about it. It's, you know, this is very near and dear to their heart. They've also been talking about this section of the ordinance and how to make changes. So Conservation Commission wants to have a meeting with us to talk about this, and the HDC wants to meet with us to talk about the master plan.
So this is
Not
a
necessar-
planning board meeting, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's by statute, when it becomes a planning board meeting.
Do we have a work session with them or an actual meeting with them?
Well, with the Conservation Commission, we'd have a work session too.
I was gonna say, that sounds
Conservation
more
It'd
like.
be a
Commission,
planning board
yeah.
work session, and the Conservation Commission would be
Okay.
invited.
Yeah.
And that could be September, that could be our second meeting in September.
Or we could, if it's just a work session, can't we do an hour before
Or
our
we
meeting?
could, you could, if you want to do an hour before the meeting on the 17th. But, I mean, it's going to be,
You wanna,
See-
sorry, I don't wanna jump ahead, go ahead. The hour before topic, the 6 o'clock
Yeah,
topic.
that's on my list.
Okay.
That's on my list. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead.
yeah.
I want the board to think about how the board feel about starting at 6 instead of 7.
For all.
Are we allowed
Just our
to?
general start time.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Are we
I love it.
allowed to by ordinance? I thought we had to, I thought there was something other in our charter or whatnot, that if we were having public hearings, we couldn't start till 7. That's why
Other boards start
Well,
earlier.
Then we need to check that.
We need to
But
check
if
that.
I would
that's
like
not-
to check with legal to make sure we
Yep.
can do that. I have no problem starting early.
Because
don't
other
get me
boards
wrong.
do start earlier. HTC starts 6:30.
Yep.
Sometimes.
So-
sometimes 6.
If we can start earlier, I mean, it seems like there's sort of a dead space between the end of the work day and what the heck do you do? Do you get something to eat or not, or
I went and had dinner.
destroy your world?
Then I wanna fall asleep.
You don't eat the good
You
food.
could also, you could also conduct other business.
Right, we
from
could
6 to
actually do other business for the first hour if we couldn't
and
have
we have-
public
If that's the
hearings.
case, but we'll check.
Yep.
It would give
I
us
just
a
wanna make
chance-
sure.
It would give us a chance to not, we haven't had any lately, but we do have them late meetings sometimes, and if we get an hour earlier start, that would help. So, okay.
Not against it.
Back to Article 10, so the Conservation Commission, that might work for an hour in advance. We can check with Kate and
Yep.
Peter and see if they think that would be enough time.
I did talk to them today about either doing that or the 24th, and I said I would let them know tomorrow what the planning board
Okay.
decides, so, you know.
So are you taking a poll of, I mean,
Well-
if it's the same night earlier, I think
That's
that's
preferred.
best.
The 17th
Yeah.
at 6?
I don't know
Yeah,
how to feel, but
Okay.
coming in on
I
another
guess I could
separate
do the
night is.
24th.
Yeah.
All right.
Agreed.
I can do the 24th if I have to, but I prefer the 17th.
So before we talk to the Conservation Commission, please read the proposed changes so you can be informed about those.
I have-
actually
And we'll
like
have the
them.
Conservation Commission's changes
Right,
as well.
right. That's what I was
So
gonna say.
we know what we've all been talking about and have an informed way to advance it.
The UTL is planning on joining the HDC for their second meeting in September, the 9th. So I think Zoe's gonna join on Zoom. They don't have anything scheduled that night. They were just gonna have one meeting, but, so that'll just be that meeting.
Okay.
Do you think that they wanted to have the planning board involved as well, or?
Is it just topics, but however, is just master plan topics inside of the HTC boundaries?
It's just to get feedback from the HDC.
Right.
Input for the master plan.
To make sure that the master plan incorporates the importance of history and historic district, which,
Chairman, if we're there, doesn't it become your meeting though?
It does, I'm thinking about that. I mean, that's no big deal. I mean, it is what it is. Not like, it's not gonna be Gavel City.
So do you wanna, how do you wanna invite the planning board, or do you wanna have it as a planning board meeting, or?
Well, I'm pretty sure by statute, if
Right.
it's a joint meeting, it is always a planning board meeting. So even if it's on the HDC night, it's a planning board meeting.
I want to talk to the chair, see what she wants to do.
Yeah, why don't I do that? And
Yeah. we
How
have
far
time.
out is it again?
It's September 9th.
it's not that far.
I am not.
I know they're, I've spoken with the chair. She's very interested in having the meeting, so I'm sure it'll be
Opening
well received.
football season,
Um,
very important night. I have guests coming over.
So the master plan is in final stages of text compilation. The consultants have prepared their first draft of existing conditions that came to staff and to me Monday night very late. I've read it once. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it yet.
I've read part of it.
It's a first draft. It needs work. The really important part is coming next Monday, which will be recommendations and basically the substance of what they'll be recommending as consultants. That ties into their proposed schedule. They have a minor revision schedule and a major revisions schedule. Their first email draft last week was to get everything to the planning board and give us 1 week to review it, which I didn't feel was adequate. And they didn't give a lot of time for staff either. So they're still looking at as early as October 15th, planning board meeting, which is that our meeting?
That is our meeting. Yeah.
Okay. Adoption, or a November 5th planning board meeting adoption. It's going to be dependent on what we see. I can't say the existing conditions draft is wordy, but other than that, it's not too bad. And it's the stuff that's coming next week that'll determine whether this aggressive schedule can be met or not. So I don't know how the board feels and how much you want to be looped in, if at all, on these working drafts as they come along. I know UTIL's concerned if they get too many cooks in the pot, they're going to go nuts because they feel they're out of budget. So there is that.
I will say, just in terms of my being able to be prepared, you're talking about a very busy season for teachers, so if we can have drafts kind of earlier, then it'd be nice, because I'm gonna have a lot with the kids, and with, Halloween coming up and all of that, it gets very busy, so if I can have extra time to kind of be able to read through and process, that would be helpful to me.
Okay. We should know a lot more after Monday night. Hopefully it'll be before 10:30 at night like this past one, but we'll see. Yes.
Do you know how they're dealing with infrastructure?
It's touched on in the existing conditions, but it also references some supplemental information that staff's been providing that wasn't a part of the document that was sent to me, so I don't know if you have that stuff.
I don't.
That's a question I'm going to ask them, because I had the same question. HCC Conservation Commission, that's it. My last item was a different start time. We already talked about that. So if that's all, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.